that we conducted with an iPad. So one of the things that I want to continue for my successor, Prosecutor Hank Savislak, was basically trying to make use of our technology today to handle our cases. We certainly can't live in the past. We have to live in the future and in the present. And certainly technology is going to be something that we're going to be using in our lives and also in the court system. I think in the federal court system now, when you want to file paperwork, you have to file it online. And I'd say within the next 10 years or less in the state of Michigan, I think all of the counties in Michigan probably will be doing that. If you're filing paperwork, it's going to be filed by computer. You're not going to see papers. And I know our county clerk, Amanda Riska, they've started the process of going paperless. I know it takes time to do that. Our office, thanks to my predecessor last March, went paperless, and we're underway in year number 2. We had some growing pains, but we are improving each and every day. In that Jabari Johnson case, there was a Assistant Jake Dickerson who did a great job, and he was found guilty as charged. It was a case involving where the defendant had attacked a corrections officer and tried to stab in the neck and indicated he wanted to kill that officer. Another case in the February of note was People versus Brian Kane. This is a individual who had been convicted of a number of break-in and enterings, I believe 18 in his career, and his particular specialty of recent years was breaking into pharmacies and stealing OxyContin. He was convicted as a fourth habitual in a week-long jury trial in front of Judge McBain. Possession of over 450 grams of OxyContin. And he's going to be sentenced soon, but because of his record and because of the charge that he was convicted of, he's going to be spending some time at DOC. And also, I want to mention too that as elected prosecutor, I did run on a platform. One of those things was to adopt the no deals on parolees who commit new crimes. Safe to say that I've honored that platform. We have not seen too many parolee cases, surprisingly, in the first quarter of this year. Although we just started 2 capital cases this morning. One has to do with a homicide case in the city, and the other has to do with an armed robbery case last year at the Aeroquip Credit Union. And that particular defendant is on trial in that case, was on parole when that happened. So I've honored that. Also, I wanted to target violent criminals and sexual predators, and happy to report that I've done that as well. Certainly going after armed robbers, defendants who go after children for their own sexual gratification, to assault them. We've done that. And I also mentioned that I wanted to create a program where I assign an assistant prosecutor to handle financial scams on seniors. And I've done that. I've assigned Assistant Prosecutor Charlie Hamlin to do that. And I wanted to do that because I think, because of our demographics, I think many of the baby boomers are starting to retire. And I think given that fact, I think there's going to be a great attack by criminals looking to take advantage of people, and I think that certainly is going to be a great target market for them, and especially with the availability of online and computers, that scams, especially financially, are going to be growing. And so I wanted to take a proactive approach and be on top of that, work with law enforcement, including the Sheriff, Steve Rand. This past week, with Sheriff Steve Rand, Charlie Hammond, my assistant, and myself, we did present a 2-hour presentation at the Department of Aging to about 70 seniors talking about financial scams, some basic scams, and that went over pretty well. In addition to that, I also wanted to be more accessible to the public. It's good for me to come out and talk to people, take questions. also to meet people, whether it's in my office, but I said that I would meet people in the community. And I've done that starting the first week of January, every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. I'm in different parts of the county for coffee, to be able to answer any questions citizens may have about our judicial system, questions about laws or judicial decisions have been made. The first Wednesday of the month, I'm in Horton at the Subway there. The second Wednesday, I'm in Grass Lake at Ryan's Restaurant. The third Wednesday of the month, I'm at the Roxy Cafe. And the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm at the Spring Arbor Cafe in Spring Arbor Township. So if you or any of your friends ever have any questions, show up those days, and I'd be happy to talk with you over a cup of coffee. Finally, the last thing I'm working on is that I said I would reinstitute the bad check collection program. And I made some progress with that. I currently am thinking of, instead of privatizing it, thinking of creating a broader unit, an economic crimes unit, which not only would include bad checks, but would also include things like embezzlement, organized scams, also including racketeering. And so that's in the works, and so that's pretty exciting as well. And I also wanted to make sure I developed a good relationship with law enforcement. I think I had that. Starting tomorrow morning from 8 to 12 at the courthouse, we're putting on our first legal updates for local police officers. I think our office has not done that in some time. So I'm pretty excited about doing that. Myself and Charlie Hamlin are going to be presenting on legislation that's new from 2012. Believe it or not, we had 176 either new laws or statutes that were amended criminally by the state of Michigan last year. Obviously, we won't be able to go over all 176 tomorrow morning. In addition to that, we had a number of major decisions from our own state courts and also the United States Supreme Court, and we'll go over and highlight some of those as well. Some of those new laws I just want to mention to you, you may or may not know, but child abuse. Child abuse, the penalty for child abuse first degree was increased dramatically. It went from I believe a 20-year felony to a capital offense, which means you can be put in prison for up to life. And it had to do with a case that happened a couple years ago in Genesee County. It's called Dominic's Law, where a child, a 4-year-old boy, was basically beaten to death by the mom's living boyfriend. They moved in with the boyfriend, and in less than 2 weeks, the boy ended up beaten to death. And so it spurred movement in the child abuse laws to revise the statute and to increase the penalty for that. Another major change in the laws last year was that in the arson case, the legislature completely revised the arson statute and created 5 degrees of arson, including first-degree arson is now a capital offense. It's a life offense. If you burn your own dwelling, it's a life offense. An insured dwelling, that's a capital crime. And if you burn, even if it's not a defense, even if you burn your own property, your own house. So that was a major change as well. Those are some of the major changes that have occurred last year, and you may or may not know about. And so as we proceed into the rest of the year, I feel that my commitment is basically to follow the law. And I think when I met with a number of the medical marijuana advocates here in the room, I think I made that very clear to you. And whatever that law is, I'm going to follow it. If the legislature decides to amend the law and to allow for medical marijuana dispensaries, I'm going to follow the law. I think I made that clear as well. Currently, the McQueen case, it was pretty clear, I think, as we discussed in our meetings. Whether you're on one side or the other, I think both sides agreed after the McQueen decision came down, it was pretty clear that businesses could not dispense marijuana, that medical marijuana dispensaries are not allowed, that the only way that medical marijuana was going to be dispensed was through that very limited exception of a relationship between a caregiver to a patient or card holder, and have that specifically defined, with the caregiver having up to 5 potential specific patients or card holders. So that basically is what's, after that decision, what's left. And so I really appreciate a number of the dispensary owners here in town have voluntarily complied with that decision, and that certainly has been very encouraging to me, that our citizens want to follow the law, make sure they're following the law. And I appreciate that greatly. I could go on for a lot longer with 176 laws, but I wanted tonight just to tell you what's been going on, what we're doing. It's been pretty interesting, pretty challenging, pretty exciting. And I think some of the medical marijuana advocates in the crowd tonight might get a kick out of it, but I told my wife, you know, there was a protest against me in front of the county tar building on the medical marijuana case, and I said, well, I guess I've arrived. You know, I've only been in office less than 3 months. And she said to me, Jerry, you know, I wouldn't get too excited about that. You know, your office is in the courthouse. It was a protest at the county tar building before you get too excited. I said, okay, but you know, I never dreamed that getting elected prosecutor, I'd have a protest against me in my first 3 months of office, or less than that. But I can tell you sincerely, though, I respect the Constitution. I've taken an oath to uphold it, and I firmly believe in people's right to protest, to do that civilly. So I think that's great. And whether it's about me or somebody else, I think that's, as citizens, that we've got a right to do that. But on the other hand, too, I hope those same people who protested will respect my obligations and duty as a prosecutor to uphold the Constitution as well. And when the highest court in our state comes down with a very clear-cut decision, to me, you know, that's part of my duty and obligation to follow that the best that I can. So with that, I'd like to open up for questions. I think there might be a few out there tonight.
Who's first? I got one.
We got questions.
Yes.
Okay. Well, when the elections were going on, I was under the assumption that you were, you know, for medical marijuana, that you
That's right.
backed it. And I understand what you're saying, where you're coming from. But why are the prosecuting attorneys, say in Washington County, are you telling me that they're disobeying the law? It's that, you know, they're allowing these places to operate. So are they disobeying the law? Is that what you're telling us? You know, there's other places too that are open.
Yeah.
Well, good question. You know, I can tell you that it's, you're basically saying, well, hey, other counties are allowing that, why not you?
Right.
Well, all I can tell you is that I can't speak for them. I'm not the prosecutor of another county. I'm only the prosecutor for Jackson County. And People of Queen basically says what it says. And it's pretty clear cut. And I'm going to follow the law. And I don't know about their situation. You know, that's, you know, they have to make their own decision if they're what they're going to do. But I do know that other counties are following the law. There are certainly exceptions, as you raised, but I do know there are other counties who are following the law, and that's my position.
That was a very partisan decision, and I think it was probably bought and paid for. So besides that, because if you read the law, it's clear that that wasn't the intent of what the people voted in. And then, so another question is, how do you propose, and I'm asking you because we all do want to be legal, how do you propose that we get cancer patients their Simpson oil when their caregiver doesn't make that? And, you know,
or
and
can't
if you have find out you have, you know, the doctor says you're terminal, but this Simpson oil will help you, where do you get it from? You can't wait for someone to grow it and make it. How do we get our
cancer
terminal patients, how do we get them what they need? And I'm hoping you can give us a clue on how to do that.
Well, like I said before, I met with a number of you within 2 weeks after the decision came out, actually when my letter came out. And I told you that I'm following the law, and that under the law, there's a narrow exception where either a person, patient, or card holder can grow up to 12 marijuana plants, or they can have a caregiver do that for them. And that's what the law is allowing for. Now, a number of you indicated, well, you know, a number of the counties are still allowing that.
Right.
And so I raised the question, well, I don't know if that's true, but if that is true,
It is true.
why can't, you go to this county?
You can't.
If it's Washtenaw County and do that.
Well, I'm thinking.
And what I was told was this, is that, well, it's not convenient to drive there,
And it's
or it's more
costly.
expensive. But it's not that it's not accessible.
But
Well,
That's what I heard.
for old people that are, I'm talking a lot, most of these people are very elderly.
Yeah, they're-
And some of them aren't, but
and
for
ill.
them to get there is gonna pose a problem instead of going down to Jackson,
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask
Okay.
what that is? What is that oil?
We're trying to keep this organized, so we're
Right.
going on to the next
Right.
question.
We're gonna go like this.
We'll come
Okay.
back to you, okay?
Side to side here. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. I don't know.
Go
Okay. Do you believe in the Second Amendment means what the founders meant? I can be more elaborate if you like, but I think well.
I thought that might come up, so I brought my pocket constitution. How about that? Second Amendment. The United States Constitution reads, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I believe in that.
Okay.
Last 4 words.
Now, my second question, do you believe the government has the power to infringe on our Second Amendment?
Well, what do you mean by infringe?
Regulate. As far as banning certain weapons or ammunition, magazines, types of rifles, handguns, licensing, regulating where you can carry, where you cannot carry, anything that would prohibit a citizen in the self-defense actions of their personal
Medication,
Pardon me?
medication, along with all the rest of
Okay.
that.
We're going to stick with the First or Second Amendment. One at a time, Steve. Okay.
No, I mean, because of that.
Steve, we'll
The
come
ATF.
back to you.
Okay.
All right. Excellent question. Again, as prosecutor, I've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, both of the United States and Michigan, actually. And the Second Amendment is part of the Constitution. So that's part of my oath to uphold it. So, yes. The tension I have as a prosecutor is also being chief law enforcement officer for the county. And I have the tension, I'm respecting and upholding constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment right to bear arms. On the other hand, I also have to be concerned with law enforcement, trying to enforce the law and making sure that people certainly are getting along and not infringing on other people's rights. And certainly, you're asking a very difficult question too. There's tension, especially with the shootings we've had in Colorado this past year and the shootings in Connecticut. There's been a huge push to restrict gun rights. We already have gun control already. I mean, there's a number of different laws we have restricting gun ownership, registration, for example, and where you can carry a gun. And we've got weapons-free zones here in Michigan. And the governor, in fact, vetoed legislation in late December which would have cleared or lifted weapons-free zones. I can tell you as a law enforcement, the chief law enforcement officer, I deal with the police here in this county. Certainly, there's a big concern about allowing citizens to have weapons in weapons-free zones. Let's say a high school sporting event, a bar, a school. The reason for that is that although in many respects I think that certainly has is well-intentioned, has some good aspects to it, I can tell you that it's difficult to shoot a handgun accurately. It's difficult to shoot a gun accurately under stress when you don't have a lot of time to make decisions. You can imagine in a sporting venue, especially a high school game, and I've had kids gone through schools grade school and high school and been involved in sports. Certainly emotions can run high. You want your child to do well, him or her to do well. And maybe things don't go well. I think if we allow guns into those particular zones which are weapons free, I can see the potential for some great harm to some innocent bystanders. Someone thinks that they're, pull out their gun because they think they need to, or maybe they get angry, or maybe, they're under the influence of some type of substance, and some bystander accidentally gets shot and killed. Or maybe they don't like the referee's call and they get mad, and after the game they go up to him and shoot him or her. So there's definitely danger there. There's a tension there. I can say that ultimately I stand on the side of protecting the Constitution, upholding that. But I understand too, when it comes to guns, there's certainly we already have gun control in place in many parts of the country. And one of the tragic things about the 2 shooting events we've had towards the end of last year is that, as a prosecutor, I've been an attorney for almost 30 years, a prosecutor for almost 18 years. And when I was a city prosecutor, I met with people individually all the time because that was really misdemeanor prosecution. Many people didn't have attorneys. So I got really good talking to people one-on-one who were angry with me, who just wanted to have their story be told to somebody, to listen to them. I mean, I agree with you, but they wanted to have their voice heard. And in doing that, I ran into a number of people, I would say maybe 6 to 12 people I knew by face in the city, walking around, that definitely had some serious mental issues. And I think of the shootings we've seen tragically in Colorado and Connecticut, although the main emphasis has been on, increasing gun control, I really haven't heard a lot of public discussion about mental health issues and the treatment of that. And to me, I think that's the bigger component of both of those cases to try and prevent further tragedies. What are we doing about that? What's the history of those 2 shooters? Really, what was the in-depth history? They had mental issues, but what was going on? How did they get to that point? What's the discussion about that? I really haven't seen a lot of attention on that. I think that's really where it needs to be, because I think in Congress and the President, the push for the gun control rights that failed, even if they had passed, my understanding, based on what I read about it, was that it wouldn't have made a difference in either of those 2 shootings. And so that's not effective, legislation that's going to make a difference. And so that's kind of a long, roundabout answer of my opinion on that.
So you support
I support the Second Amendment, but I understand we do have some registration issues. There is some limited gun control. But I think we have enough gun control laws in effect as it is would be my opinion on that.
Did you, this is kind of a side note, but did you know that it's legal to carry in schools and hospitals and so on and so forth, as long as you have a CPL, but you carry open?
I have a disagreement on that. It's a good question you raise here, because I went to a prosecutor's conference for all the prosecutors in the state of Michigan at the end of January this year. And that issue came up in one of our small groups. But prosecutors differ on that. My position is I disagree. I don't care if you have a concealed pistol license or not. Weapons-free zone is a weapons-free zone is a weapons-free zone because there's a reason for that. And until the governor and our legislature change that law, otherwise, that's how I interpret it. I know some other prosecutors may differ with me, but that's my view on that.
My understanding is it's not illegal because there's nothing prohibiting it, so it's not an illegal action. The Michigan State Police legal update number 86 specifically mentions that and says it is not an offense. It is a legal action.
I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware there are weapons-free zones, and to me, my interpretation of that trumps, what you mentioned about the CPL. But I know there are differences of opinion on that.
One more question.
Sure.
Would you prosecute police that invade homes like they did in Boston?
And can you give me the exact fact pattern of the police you're talking about? the fact pattern.
After the
Like, how are
bombing.
they invading
Well,
their homes?
okay, if they went to a door and forcibly entered the house without the consent of the homeowner.
You know, I did not really follow the precise detailings of that, how they were entering the home. Were they were not arresting anyone. You're saying it's more of a civil action as far as they were going, infringing on the person's real property rights of their home in that instance, and they were damaged somehow.
No, actually, if it's against the Constitution for unreasonable searches and seizures, they have to have a warrant. The Constitution requires that it be signed by a judge and sworn under oath of what they're looking for in the place to be found at, and they're simply just going to doors and coming in without the consent. So that is in my view,
Violation.
a home invasion, and a property owner has the right to defend themselves. Now, the thing is that they're using that particular incident and the public's outcry as far as these suspects, looking for the suspects, but they're still invading these people's homes, and that to me is an issue. I'm just curious if you would actually prosecute people that did that.
Well, it would have to depend on the facts. I mean, I can tell you that as a lawyer, I mean, we all like to have things black and white. But doing this for almost 30 years and being a prosecutor for almost 18 years, it really does depend on the facts of the case. One case can be very different from another case based on the facts, even though the law is the same. You know, we're talking about search and seizure law, the Fourth Amendment. But the facts may be different. And obviously, you may know, there are a number of different exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. Well, it's called exigent or emergency circumstances. And certainly in this case, with not knowing a lot about the specific facts of what the police and law enforcement are doing in the Boston community, but certainly just my sense of watching on TV, this seemed to be a very, very urgent matter that was going on. I mean, they identified the two terrorist bombers. They knew they were in the area. They were in hot pursuit of them. I don't know exactly what their information was as to what precise house or neighborhood they might be in. And certainly, a landowner certainly can give consent for police to enter the home as well. So I don't know the precise facts. And that's when I say facts, that's why I say that, because I don't know. Did some owners consent or not? Did they have some specific example? Maybe this, one of the bombers, there's a trail of blood drops going into the front door of 100 East Street or whatever. You know, so obviously the police officer doesn't need an arrest warrant to arrest someone who's committed a felony. I mean, it's pretty basic law. For most misdemeanors, a police officer can only arrest if that misdemeanor is occurring in their presence. Felonies, the felony does not have to be committed in their presence for them to arrest it, but they do have to have probable cause to believe that, you know, Joe Smith committed that armed robbery, that bank robbery, or in Boston, he basically was involved with a bombing of innocent people. They have to have some information, evidence to believe that, you know, Joe Smith was involved there. Joe Smith believed that he's in this house or in this neighborhood. And this just happened. It's fresh information, so they can act on it. You do raise a good point. You know, if they don't have some type of connection, some type of probable cause, certainly they shouldn't be going into someone's home. You're right. Would I prosecute him? You know, again, it would depend on the facts of the case. You know, what the report is. To make a blanket statement that, yeah, I will prosecute him, well, I will prosecute a case, and what I tell people, any criminal case here in Jackson County, the police investigate, they bring me a case, and, you know, it has evidence that shows I can prove the charge beyond a reasonable doubt, I'll prosecute that case. But
Right.
you've got to have the evidence for that.
Can we move on?
Yes.
Did you get your answer, Craig?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I hear him.
Yeah, I'm Roger Mulford, and I have the Jackson County Compassion Club. And since the dispensaries in Jackson County have been closed down, I don't know if you've noticed, but Craigslist is lit up with ads for caregivers looking for patients. patients looking for caregivers. And I know of just in this short period of time that we've all been shut down, there has been one instance where a patient was robbed of $500. A caregiver was strong-armed and their money and medicine removed. And another caregiver had their home broken into and was robbed shortly after meeting with a potential patient. And they're afraid to come to you. They're afraid to go to the police for fear of prosecution of themselves. What would you suggest that I tell them to do and how to handle this? And is your office looking into these types of crimes that have taken place, that are taking place now after the safe access has been closed down?
Well, that's bad. I don't want any of our citizens in Jackson County being robbed or assaulted, whether it's for, seeking medical marijuana or for some other reason. And certainly what they need to do is report that immediately to the police, make a report and say you want to prosecute. The police will investigate and they'll bring that report and a warrant request to my office to review to see if we have enough evidence to prosecute that case. That's what I advise them to do.
I don't think they will.
Oh, no.
Well, Roger, I can't force people to do that, but, citizens, if you get wronged, certainly criminally, we do need victims to step forward and to, to participate for law enforcement to do their jobs. So they need to, I know it's difficult, but they need to step forward and, participate and want to prosecute. We need some cooperation. We'll do the heavy lifting, but we need the victim to at least participate in some level.
But other people, it's just the sense is that we become criminals again in our own, and that there's a potential prosecution, especially by the caregivers. If police come in, all of a sudden they're going to do plant counts, and how much do you have? They're fearful of your office.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
not
for
a
good
way for
reason.
them to that they should be able to come to you. Would you give them protections, or if they came to you, rather than feeling the risk of being prosecuted?
Well, you're saying if they have too many plants and they get...
Well, they're just going to be, all of a sudden the image of where is the crime shifts. All of a sudden the person who's reporting the crime
Is the criminal.
is becoming the criminal rather than just trying to report the crime. And so they're fearful of coming to your office, even if they're within their plant counts, even if they have less amounts than what they're allowed to have. They're still fearful of your office.
Well, in my position, Roger, I think I made it clear with my meetings with you and many other medical marijuana advocates is that I'm going to follow the law. So if they're within the law, they have nothing to worry about then.
Okay, can a medical marijuana card holder get a concealed weapons permit?
Yes. Well, actually, let me take that back and just say this, that we just had gun board review last week, coincidentally, that issue came up, and I think on the application it doesn't really mention that, and so technically speaking, you don't have to report that, and if it's not on the application, that is not going to disqualify you from a concealed pistol license application as long as you don't have any other disqualifiers on there. And the reason for that is that under federal law, as you know, marijuana is still considered illegal. But currently that's what I understand with the applications. Yes, it's a good question.
So can you hold a gun if you, carry a gun, carry a hunting rifle, whatever, if you're a patient or a caregiver? You can possess your hunting. If you can get it, you should be able to possess it. But
well, what are the facts for that? Are you in your own home? Are you
in your own
traveling around with a concealed pistol license? So you're in your own home.
Well, I mean, just vaguely, so people here know, can they carry a gun? Can they go hunting if they're a patient without worried about getting arrested because they got their card on them?
Well, again, it depends what the facts are. I mean, obviously, if you've got a concealed weapons permit, I mean, you have a weapons permit that's for concealed weapons. But it's on your property, you know, if you're going hunting, certainly if a gun, I mean, it has nothing to do with a concealed
Right.
weapons license.
So that's, I'm just wondering, regular guns, can you do that? Can you have?
On your own property?
Yeah.
I don't see an issue with that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on, we've got a couple more questions here. The first one, when a Republican congressman visits Jackson and has a valid doctor's recommendation for marijuana, how do you suppose he obtains his medicine?
He
Well,
has
can
to
you give
go
me some more
out
facts on that?
of the city, go to Lansing or
Obviously, I think what
Washington.
you're
I'm saying
just
there's a congressman that has a medical marijuana card.
Yeah,
out
but-
of the District of Columbia.
but the question you're asking really is, under the act, is someone comes from out of state and they have a card and they want to get their marijuana here, right? Isn't that the
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a section in the law
Okay.
that,
Exactly. Well, you're right. I mean, that's what the law says about that. So,
would you arrest them in Jackson County if that's outside of the McQueen case as you just described?
well, what would they be doing?
They would be obtaining and possessing medical marijuana under a doctor's recommendation.
And would they be getting that from a caregiver here in
It would be
Michigan?
impossible for them to obtain it from a caregiver since it's impossible for them to be a resident of Michigan while they're a congressman from the District of Columbia.
So they would not have a caregiver relationship then. Well, under the McQueen case, though, you're right. As it's written now, that seems to be in conflict with the act.
Yes, big
course.
time.
In conflict.
Everything's in
Well,
conflict with the act.
but time out, everyone. I'm not here to, say to you that the McQueen case has all the answers. I'm certainly not saying that to you. I mean, I'm here to follow the law, and that's what McQueen is. Obviously, there are certainly questions that are raised. I mean, that's an excellent question you raise. Certainly, that seems to conflict with that decision.
Yeah,
You're
it
right.
does.
Yes.
Okay, two-part question. There is at least one case in Jackson County where a caregiver who was following Section 8 of the medical marijuana is being prosecuted. Is it your intention to continue prosecuting in such cases where Section 8 is complied with? At which point in the process will those charges be dropped?
Well, very simple. There was a case that came up with the Supreme Court last year, People versus Kalanick, which addressed that very question. Talking about Section 8, and basically it sets forth the procedure that that person, through their attorney, can file a motion and request that the case be dismissed under Section 8. Calls for an evidentiary hearing to see if the evidence supports that particular claim, that defense. If it does, the judge under that law says that the case would be dismissed. Yes.
Sir, I'm just a little bit concerned about my personal safety and the safety of other patients and caregivers. I would like to just ask you if it seems like you're kind of liberal as to a caregiver possessing a handgun or a rifle or shotgun in their home. It's what I'm interpreting from what you're saying. If someone should come into my house at night and break a window or a door, force entry, and I believe that my bodily harm to myself and my family is in danger, and I shot that person dead, would I be prosecuted for having a handgun or a gun in my possession, along with, I have a plant count in medical marijuana? Would you prosecute me for something like that?
Well, you're asking really a two-part question. One, the law of self-defense and using deadly force to protect yourself in your own home. Second question really has to do with medical marijuana law. And they're two different questions. When it comes to defending yourself, you certainly have a right to defend yourself. And you feel that you in your home, you are under attack, you certainly can use a weapon. Obviously, as I said before, you look at the facts of the case as well. But in general, Michigan pretty much is a state which recognizes the use of deadly force to protect yourself in your home, especially if you have facts which are pretty clear. Let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's dark outside. Your lights in your home are out. Doors and windows are locked. No one is supposed to be coming in your house at that time. Certainly, and someone breaks in, it's an intruder. You don't know who that person is, what they're going to do. You think your life is threatened, or your wife or your children. Certainly, in those circumstances, use of a gun to protect yourself, you wouldn't be prosecuted if you shot and killed that person. Most likely, that would be the result in my mind. I would not be prosecuting you because that would be what is known as justifiable homicide. The other question is, well, what would happen if the police came to investigate? Okay, I did use deadly force, but it wasn't self-defense. Could I be prosecuted for medical marijuana? Again, it goes to what is found. Obviously, if you're within the law, you won't be prosecuted. But if you're growing 1,000 marijuana plants in your home, I think you've got a problem.
Okay, well, everything that, I would like to consider that my hypothetical question would be somebody that is following the law. And, I'm concerned about protecting myself and my family.
Absolutely.
And it concerns me, that the federal government doesn't allow me to possess the two in one spot at one time, a gun and medical marijuana. And it's a very scary world out there, and cops carry guns to protect themselves and us, and I would like to, at least in my own home or business, protect myself and my family. And I just wanted to get how your force would react to something like that. Should they come into my home and I have less than 72 plants and they find a shotgun or a pistol by my bedside, would I be prosecuted for something like that? That's really my concern, my question.
Well, if you're within the law, you're okay. But obviously, if you're not within the law, you're not okay. And I can tell you that under Michigan firearms law, if I'm doing something illegal and I do have a gun, let's say I've got heroin in my house, and I'm afraid someone's going to take my heroin or my proceeds, my cash. And so I've got a couple of handguns ready to go. And they're in close proximity to either my guns or my heroin. And the police come in, let's say do a search warrant, and they find them there. You're going to be prosecuted for the guns if they're in close proximity to the drugs or the money. So that's pretty clear. Your question really goes, well, am I legal or not? Well, if you're illegal, I think you're in good shape. But if you're not, then you're not in good shape. All right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next question. Does probable cause have to happen in your presence? Or is it a misdemeanor?
No, that's not the question. The question is, you said that a misdemeanor has to happen in the officer's presence, right?
In most cases, yes.
Okay, one doesn't have to. You see, here's the problem.
Well, let me answer that question first. The misdemeanor rule has very limited exceptions. One, drunk driving, where there's an accident, officer comes to the scene, and someone's suspected to be a drunk driver, they went off, got into an accident, they can arrest that person for drunk driving if they, of course, find some evidence. Even if they didn't witness it. Right. Another exception is if domestic violence situations. They come to the scene, of course the domestic violence has occurred. If it has occurred, they talk to the man and woman. If they see evidence of a domestic violence, that's a limited exception where someone in a misdemeanor case can be arrested at the scene without a warrant. Correct.
Okay. The sale of marijuana is not listed anywhere because in order to arrest somebody for the sale of marijuana, you would have to witness that misdemeanor. Is that correct?
Correct.
So as long as the sale of marijuana is not listed in law anywhere as being illegal, then why are we considering it to be illegal? The way the Supreme Court ruled on that was they said the transfer, transportation, and delivery of marijuana is illegal, therefore the sale of marijuana is illegal.
Are you referring to the McQueen case?
I'm referring exactly to the McQueen
Okay.
case.
Well,
Yes.
first off, possession of marijuana or use of marijuana are misdemeanor crimes. The sale or delivery of marijuana is a felony crime.
The sale
So
of
it's a big
marijuana, the
difference.
delivery of marijuana, maybe. The sale of marijuana is not listed there, sir.
Well, it is in the criminal statute for felonies. It doesn't have to be a sale, but the way the statute is written is that it's a broad use of words. Delivery, a transaction, most times it's for compensation for money, but not necessarily to fit within the felony statute.
The word acquisition is the first word in the medical use of marijuana. What would the acquisition indicate if it wasn't the purchase of marijuana? I mean, it's kind of a, you know,
Well,
that's how we acquired Alaska, was we bought it.
You're referring to the Medical Marijuana Act. I'm referring to the criminal statute for delivery of a controlled substance, which is marijuana. And so that certainly would fall into that position, unless, I think one of you raised the issue if it fell under an immunity provision under the Act, Section 8, for example, or Section 4. But if it doesn't fall within those immunity provisions, it's then subject to the criminal statute for delivery of marijuana, which is a felony crime. So that's what you're really asking, and that's what the analysis would be. Okay.
So the analysis is there's nowhere that the sale of marijuana is illegal. It's not in law that the sale of marijuana is illegal. If you're talking about the Controlled Substance Act, the Controlled Substance Act specifically says that Congress did not intend to occupy the entire field, which is the reason we can do the experiment that we're doing, right?
Well, I disagree with that. You know, the federal law clearly says marijuana is illegal. It's been interesting. Well, it's been interesting to note that the federal government really hasn't been enforcing that law of recent years. Okay, and so they've let states, I believe, pass laws where you can have medical marijuana, because clearly that's contrary to what the federal law states about marijuana.
It is contrary to what the federal law states, except that in that exception, they said they did not intend to occupy the entire field. If Congress says we don't intend to occupy the entire field, any judge that's given that information is going to decide they didn't intend to occupy the entire field. I mean,
well, but I don't understand your
There's no
question,
money
because
in it
really
then.
you're talking about, okay, you're talking two different things. You're talking about federal law. We're talking about state law in Michigan. And I think what people don't understand is that, you know, Michigan, we've got state laws, we have state courts, we have a state legislature. Very much different than federal laws, Congress, federal prosecutors, federal law enforcement. Although they can be very similar, they are very different when it comes to jurisdiction and enforcement. And so you can't talk with them about being the same terms, because they're very different. They're not the same.
yeah, but in this case, the federal law still has supremacy. I understand that. However,
Well,
in this case, it's not commandeering. That they can't force the states to enforce that federal law by telling us that we have to. And when they gave us the right to experiment, I mean, their idea was that we would experiment the opposite. We would have higher crimes than what the federal
That's
law
right.
says. But it still
That's the
says
key.
the same thing. They don't intend to occupy the entire field. That's the decision that they used in whatever town it was that Trebek sued them in.
City of Wyoming.
City of Wyoming, exactly.
Yep.
And that's what the decision that came out of the appellate court on that was, you know, this is what the federal law says.
Well, you know, it's a good question you raised, because I'm talking about that tomorrow. You know, that case is on appeal, as probably many of people in this room know, and it's on the preemption doctrine, exactly, where, you know, the city of Wyoming, they basically enacted a zoning ordinance, which is it's next to Grand Rapids, and they basically said, you know, that if someone who's in the city has to be following all the laws. Well, federal laws against, it basically says you can't possess marijuana, it's illegal. And so, Terbeek, as you know, is an attorney. I believe he was a patient caregiver as well there, and sued. And the appellate court agreed with them and said that the preemption doctrine didn't apply. However, the Michigan Supreme Court has agreed to take that case, and so they are going to be looking at that case, and that's going to be the issue.
Yeah,
that's going to be an issue. So I don't know what they're going to do about that, but I mean they're going to be discussing that, and you're right. We'll see what they're going to do with that.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question.
My turn?
Your turn.
Okay. So you're not a federal prosecutor, so we don't really, right?
I'm not a federal prosecutor. Well, actually, they're called the U.S. Attorney's Office, Assistant U.S. Attorney.
Okay.
I'm a
so
state
when you're
prosecutor.
balancing all the things that you need to take into consideration, the state legislature's actions and the state Supreme Court, have you ever considered taking into account the citizens' initiative that even started this? Which,
That's right.
To me, a citizens' initiative is where we set aside what our lawmakers
That's correct.
have tried to do because we don't agree with them.
Correct.
So we take it into our own hands.
Yes.
And do you balance that at all
No, he
in
doesn't.
your consideration? Because you didn't talk about it. You mentioned the legislature, you mentioned the Supreme Court, you did not mention a citizen's petition.
No, you're right. I didn't mention that. However, yeah, I do take that into consideration.
Voters initiative.
But I also have my oath I have to follow. I also have to respect the Constitution. And
Who put you in
as many of
office?
you know, our Constitution had in it a very special structure. It's called the Separation of Powers Doctrine, which makes our country a lot different from many other countries in the world. And it's basically that separation of powers between judicial, executive, and legislative.
And it
I represent.
also contains
Let me
this-
finish, ma'am.
this-
Let me finish, okay? I represent the executive. I'm not the legislative. I'm not the judicial, okay? And I'm here to follow the law. You're right. The Michigan Medical Marijuana Act passed. However, unfortunately, I think many people in this room would agree that it would have been nice if it had a lot more specificity in it, so there wasn't delay in its implementation. People could understand what's going on. And certainly, if we had more specificity and clarity, we wouldn't have to rely on our Michigan Supreme Court to make a decision earlier this year in the McQueen case regarding dispensaries, if that was not clear. Because
But I guess we didn't
for law
expect
enforcement,
for
there was a
our
lot of
judicial branch,
vagueness
our
about how it
legislative
applied.
branch, and so on, to try to circumvent what we clearly said we wanted. And that is what happened, is that every branch of government, including the judicial branch, has stepped in and tried to limit our freedom on this issue.
Yes, they have.
Including you.
Illegally.
I have not limited your freedom. I followed the law.
No, a corrupt
No,
law.
you said you would. You would choose to follow the legislature or the Supreme Court, and you didn't mention us. So therefore, you are kind of trampling all over
The people.
our part of it.
The people.
I disagree, ma'am, respectfully.
Okay.
I'm following the law. Here's the
Jerry,
counterbalance.
we're going to have to move on to the next question, if you don't mind. If not, can we make that out? If it hasn't been prudent for the state LARA to have informed all caregivers that the laws have been changed.
That's right. They haven't said anything about it.
Okay, what was the question?
I'll tell you what it says. What it says is the Supreme Court decision came out on a Thursday
Yes.
or Friday, February 7th or 8th. All caregivers and patients are registered with the state.
Correct.
It wasn't until a week later that even district attorneys and prosecuting attorneys throughout the state were given notification through our Attorney General that they needed to start closing down dispensaries. At some point, since the state of Michigan, and I know that you don't control the state of Michigan, But at some point, the state of Michigan is taking in an estimated between $3 and $10 million on the registration of for caregivers and patients. Those patients and caregivers do not have access to the volumes of information that our prosecuting attorneys have. It would have been prudent, should have been demanded, possibly should now be demanded, that when these laws are changing as quickly as they are changing on the whim of a few Supreme Court justices, that these patients and caregivers deserve some notification.
Correct.
Not
you can't
pop
just
on your door, hey, we changed the law last week.
And all of a sudden you have no access to your medicine.
So
it's crime.
That's what we need to ask our prosecuting attorneys to help us get done.
He won't
that
help.
They can assist us to make sure that caregivers and patients are working within the law. Because not every caregiver or patient out there is retaining an attorney, has volumes of law books, and respectfully would be afraid to call up their prosecuting attorney and saying, hey, am I legal now? Because that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
so
Karen, right?
We need your help with that.
Well, you know, I can tell you what Lara, they don't disclose the identity of card holders' information to prosecutors.
I know,
police.
but they could.
No.
So we don't have that information.
But they have the information that they could have
sent
sent
out.
out.
Information, they could do it themselves.
But they don't give that information to us.
And they have all these millions of dollars in reserve. They can afford to send it out.
Well, you know, for a caregiver or a cardholder's card, your photo ID is not on that card, correct? Right?
Why not?
Your photo, but your addresses.
But
and
your
your
photo's
personal
not.
information.
But I guess the question I have, you know, for everyone, I know when I met with many of you, you know, I was concerned about abuse. You know, the people who need the medical marijuana, fine, but what about, the concern is how do we limit abuse where someone is getting marijuana who really doesn't have a medical need for it? And, you know, when I talked to you, basically most of you said we kind of blamed the physicians who are issuing the cards, but you know, why not have someone's picture on a card so that if you're a dispensary owner that you know this person is who they say they are? What's wrong with that?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And as a matter of fact, we are required to send our picture in, whether we're a caregiver or whether we're a patient. The reason our picture is not on those cards is because they don't have a printer that can put it on those cards.
And they have $10 million surplus.
By changing rule. They don't need legislator to change it. If you look in the rules, you'll find out that it says a photo, if one is required by rule. Not by legislation, by rule. They can make it a rule and put our driver's license on there. They do it for 400,000 healthcare professionals at that same organization that can't put ours on there.
Yeah, that's
so you're all for it then. We agree on that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
You have to show your license with your card also. When you go into a dispensary, you got to show your license and your card. And they say, is this...
But why not have the photo on the card?
It should be. And I thought that, well, the legislators shot that down.
The next question would be, what if the laws clearly violate the Constitution?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. An example would be, I'm sure there's probably laws that are passed that you say, this clearly violates the Constitution. I mean, everyone's got an opinion about what violates the Constitution. I'm sure even you have some ideas of laws that say, yeah, that clearly violates the Constitution here. Would you still prosecute cases where it violates the Constitution, which that is the Supreme...
Well, let me ask you a question, even though I'm not Irish. Affordable Care Act. Before the Supreme Court reviewed it, would you have followed it?
No.
Even though that's the law under our Constitution?
No, and here's my answer to that. Is that there's nothing in the Constitution that authorized the federal government to force us to buy medical insurance.
Well,
that is clear.
That's another debate. That's another debate.
It is.
But I mean, as far as what the law states,
and the thing is,
well, here's the thing. We could get caught into semantics, but you're asking me about will you follow the law or not? And what if that law is not valid? Well, okay. Who among us makes that decision? Okay, Are we a group of citizens in a society with a structure of laws and government, or are we just a band of people?